Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we dig into the research stack to give you the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're leaving the human world behind and diving into what really feels like pure biological science fiction, some of the most surprising adaptations in nature.
We've really dug into the research on these specialized abilities, and they feel like actual superpowers. We're talking about animals that survive freezing, solid, advanced biomechanics, and even creatures that can regenerate their entire bodies.
And we're not just talking about basic skills here. We're extracting the core innovations from sources that detail animals that seem to just defy the fundamental constraints of physics, of chemistry, simply by existing.
Our mission is to quickly break down those incredible mechanisms, give you those aha moments, and highlight the surprising relevance these solutions have for fields like medicine and material science.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with a quick-fire round of adaptations, sensory marvels, surprising strength, and some truly bizarre defense systems.
Let's start in the Arctic with the reindeer. When you think about polar survival, you think insulation, food, right? But the reindeer has to deal with this massive shift. Months of constant light versus months of near total darkness.
And its eyes have adapted in this just incredible way. The sources explain that a reindeer's eyes literally change color. In the summer, they're absorbing all that daylight and they look brown.
But when winter hits and it's overwhelmingly dark, they turn blue.
It's a living light management system.
It is. In the winter, the pressure inside the eye actually increases, which makes the pupils dilate hugely. This pressure also compresses the collagen in the layer just behind the retina.
And that compression is the key, right?
It's the whole thing. That shift changes how light reflects off the back of the eye. It massively reduces the light that gets reflected back out, which in turn really boosts its night vision. It basically turns the eye into a more powerful light-gathering lens just when it's needed most.
That's amazing. A seasonal sensor change. Okay, moving from sight to strength. When we think of the strongest animal on Earth, we usually picture something huge, but you have to shrink your frame of reference for the real champion.
The dung beetle, specifically Onthophagus taurus. Relatively speaking, it is the strongest animal in the world. It can pull over 11,141 times its own body weight.
That's like a 150-pound person hauling 6 fully loaded double-decker buses. And all of that incredible force is just for mating competition.
Exactly. The males use this brute strength in these underground tunnels, literally shoving rivals away from potential partners. But what's really interesting is that not all the males go for this strength-first strategy. You've got some that are called sneaker males.
The agile ones.
Yeah, they don't bother with the big horns and the sheer strength. They focus on being more agile and on sperm production, and they often succeed just by avoiding that tunnel combat altogether. It's a classic biological trade-off. Brute force versus sneaky resilience.
Agile sneakers versus massive tunnel brawlers. I had to read that detail twice. Speaking of resilience, let's talk about the ultimate escape artist, the fish-scale gecko.
This gecko has perfected what's called a passive defense mechanism. Its whole body is covered in these large scales, but they're incredibly loosely attached. The slightest touch from a predator is enough to make them just shear off.
So it sacrifices a huge chunk of its skin, but it gets away while the predator's left with what, a mouthful of scales?
That's it. And the repair job is incredibly fast. New scales grow back in just a matter of weeks, no permanent damage.
Then there's the infamous cockroach. The urban legend is true, right? Why can it survive for weeks after losing its head? It's horrifying, but scientifically fascinating.
It really comes down to two major differences between them and us. First, their breathing isn't centralized in the head. They breathe through tiny holes all over their bodies called spiracles.
So losing its head doesn't stop it from breathing.
Okay.
What about bleeding out?
That's the second key. Mammals, we have a high-pressure, closed circulatory system. A major wound means fatal blood loss. Cockroaches have an open circulatory system, so their blood just kind of flows around, but at a very low pressure.
So no fatal hemorrhage.
Right. Decapitation doesn't cause that immediate catastrophic pressure drop that it would for us. It allows the body to just keep on with its basic functions for weeks until it finally starves.
That is just phenomenal decentralized engineering. My final quick-fire pick has to be the superb lyrebird. I mean, we all know they mimic sounds, but the sheer size of their library is it's astounding.
This Australian songbird is a master acoustic illusionist. In the wild, it can imitate dozens of other bird calls at the same time, making it sound like an entire flock.
But the recordings of captive ones are what really blow my mind. You hear chainsaws, car alarms, camera shutters, even complex things like flutes. It's just uncanny.
And here's a really neat nugget from the research. Some of the more complex clicks and thuds, these mechanical-sounding buzzes that are part of the male's mating display, they are not mimicry at all.
They're innate calls, then.
Not innate, but they are learned directly from their parents. They're specific to their species courtship ritual. So these are sounds that have survived generationally as crucial mating signals, totally separate from their vast library of environmental mimicry.
Okay, now let's shift from these general adaptations to some profound biomechanical genius. This is where it gets really interesting. We have to talk about the mantis shrimp's punch.
What's so fascinating here is how the mantis shrimp overcomes this fundamental engineering paradox. These stomatopods, they deliver a strike that is so fast, we're talking velocities up to 23 meters per second, that their muscles alone just physically can't move that quickly.
So they need a power amplification system. They have to store elastic energy and then release it explosively. And that energy is stored in this complex mineralized thing called a saddle spring.
And here's the paradox. If you want a spring to store a ton of energy, it has to be incredibly stiff. But if you make a mineralized structure really stiff, it usually becomes brittle and just. Shatters the first time you use it. Stiff and extensible are almost always mutually exclusive.
And the mantis shrimp solved this by creating a highly optimized bilayer structure, a spring made of two totally different materials. So can you walk us through the layers without us needing a textbook?
Okay, think of it like this. The structure needs to be rigid on the outside to take the load and flexible on the inside to cushion the movement. The outer layer is heavily mineralized. That's the stiff part.
Like a concrete beam.
Exactly. When the shrimp loads the spring, this layer is pushed inward, it's compressed, it's super efficient at storing energy. And the inner layer,
That's a flexible part.
that's the tough part. It has a high organic content proteins, chitin, and it's highly flexible. When that outer layer is compressed, this inner layer is stretched at the same time. It's put under tension. And specialized stretchy proteins give it that crucial elasticity so it acts like a rubbery foam core inside the concrete.
That is just clever material placement. You put the stiff, brittle material where it's strongest under compression and the stretchy material where it's needed under tension. And how they stick these two materials together is also key, right?
Oh, absolutely. In man-made bilayer structures, the interface, where the two materials meet, is almost always the weak point. But the saddle's shape and its material distribution ensure that the neutral axis, that's the imaginary line, where internal stress is zero, is located right at that interface.
So because the stress is zero right where they join, they never peel apart, even under that immense force.
It's geometrically perfect. But wait, the club itself has to survive the massive shock waves it creates, not just from the impact, but from these cavitation bubbles that form and collapse in the water afterward.
It has to have built-in armor, or it would just self-destruct.
It does. Inside the striking club, the fibers are arranged in these corkscrew-like bundles. It's called a boulagon structure. And this structure, it acts as a phononic shield.
A shockwave filter.
Essentially, yes. This intricate arrangement selectively filters out the high-frequency shear waves, the kind of energy that would cause the most catastrophic damage to the shrimp's own tissue, protecting its arm from its own weapon.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, it's a huge lesson for engineering. We struggle to combine stiff ceramics with flexible polymers without them failing at the join. And the shrimp solved it with 2 layers and a perfect geometric fix for stress.
It really challenges our assumptions about material constraints. Now let's shift from biomechanics to the biology of extreme survival, starting with animals that conquer the cold.
The Arctic ground squirrel has to be the ultimate cold warrior.
It holds the record. It's the only known mammal to survive with its core body temperature dropping below the freezing point of water to almost -3 degrees Celsius. Its heart rate drops to a single beat per minute.
That sounds like a frozen slushie. How does it stop the water in its cells from freezing and just rupturing them?
The process is called freeze avoidance. The sources explain that the squirrel seems to actively cleanse its body of what are called ice nucleators.
The little particles that kickstart crystallization.
Exactly. They get rid of the crystal starters, which allows their body fluids to stay liquid in a supercooled state, even way below the typical freezing point. They're chemically lowering their own freezing point.
And the application there is just huge. I mean, if we can figure that process out, it could revolutionize preserving human organs for transplant. We could keep them viable for so much longer by supercooling them without that ice crystal damage.
Which raises another question. What about organisms that actually do tolerate freezing? Let's look at the wood frog.
All right, the wood frog survives being partially frozen solid.
Yeah.
Sometimes, 60 or 70% of its total body water is ice. And it does this by pumping itself full of sugar.
Correct. When ice starts forming outside the cells, it triggers this absolutely massive spike in glucose, which acts as a powerful cryoprotectant. Sugar just floods all the organs and concentrates inside the cells.
If a human had that much sugar in their system, it would be a catastrophe. High glucose causes glycation, this chemical damage that forms AGEs. We associate that with accelerated aging, vascular damage, kidney damage, things you see in severe diabetes.
And that's the biological trade-off. But studies suggest that even though the wood frog has this extreme level of sugar, the glycation rate of its hemoglobin, the rate of that damaging chemical reaction, is minimal during the freeze and the recovery.
How does it dodge the damage?
The leading hypothesis is that the combination of the severe hyperglycemia and the extremely low body temperature during the freeze actually stops the chemical reaction from happening. The cold slows down the reaction kinetics so much that the sugar can be a shield without becoming a poison.
That is truly mind-bending, using something deadly to us as a life-saving shield. Okay, moving to a different kind of constraint. Energy delivery. Let's reframe the electric eel's attack. The source calls it a functional venom analog.
We really need to shift our thinking away from the vague idea of just stunning prey. The eel's high-voltage discharges, sometimes up to 600 volts, are so precise that they remotely activate the prey fish's motor neurons.
It's a biological taser. It gives the eel this high-fidelity, involuntary control over the prey's muscles.
And when it's dealing with difficult or large prey, it uses this brilliant energy-focusing strategy.
The curling maneuver.
Right, it grabs the prey and then curls its tail, the negative pull of the electric organ, around to the opposite side of the prey's body.
And that simple geometric change drastically focuses the electric field. It can often double the voltage recorded inside the prey. They're maximizing their power output by just reshaping the electric field around the target.
And what's the end goal of that focused volley? Once it's curled, the eel delivers these repeated rapid volleys. This specific stimulation causes profound, whole-body involuntary muscle fatigue. The muscles just exhaust their ability to contract so fast that the prey is paralyzed, and it can't escape or fight back.
And the sources show this is a metabolically expensive attack, so the eel is smart about it. It actually meters the attack based on how much the prey is struggling. Once the struggling stops, it stops.
It's an energy-efficient, targeted neuromuscular blockade, but it's achieved through electricity, not the chemistry of traditional venom.
Okay, finally, let's wrap up with the absolute pinnacle of biological repair, the planarian flatworm. If there is one creature that embodies the promise of regeneration, it's this one.
Planarians are what scientists call almost immortal under the edge of the knife. You can cut them into many pieces, even a tiny fragment with fewer than 10,000 cells, and each section will regenerate into a complete, perfectly proportioned animal.
So the middle piece grows a brand new head, new eyes, a new tail, de novo, in about 2 weeks. What's the engine behind this?
The power comes from neoblasts. These are unbelievably abundant adult stem cells. They make up maybe 20 to 30% of the planarian's entire body. Experiments have shown a single transplant of neoblast is enough to restore a whole animal.
So they're true master stem cells. But the real challenge is, how does a regenerating fragment know what to rebuild and where?
It's all guided by pre-existing tissue polarity. So a wound activates the neoblasts, and then their differentiation is guided by these conserved signaling pathways, things called Wont and BMP.
Those sound highly technical. In simple terms, what are they doing?
They're setting up the coordinate system. They're telling the new cells which way is head and which way is tail. For instance, a specific Wnt inhibitor called NODAM is only expressed at wounds that are facing forward, which specifically tells the new cells start building a head here.
So the cells know their general direction, but where does the actual positional map come from? Where's the biological GPS stored?
The underlying body wall musculature, that's the map. The muscle cells are constantly expressing these signals, creating these stable chemical gradients across the tissue, and those gradients act as a coordinate system, basically telling the new stem cells exactly where they are and what kind of cell to become.
So the muscle isn't just for movement, it's the keeper of the animal's physical blueprint. The planarian is so vital because it tackles the biggest challenge in human regenerative medicine. How does a fragment achieve perfect size and shape control?
It completely challenges the concept of fixed blueprints. A planarian can scale its internal map, that want gradient, to perfectly fit the size of whatever random fragment it starts with. It proves a biological system can constantly maintain proportionality no matter how much is lost.
So what does this all mean for us? We've gone from the microscopic shock wave filtering structure in a mantis shrimp to macro-level systems, like the eel's remote paralysis and the planarian's perfect self-repair.
The sources all show us that nature is constantly challenging what we assume are constraints. They overcome the mechanical trade-off between stiffness and toughness. They bypass fundamental survival limits like the freezing point of water or the toxicity of huge sugar spikes. These extremes just reveal innovations that we currently think are impossible in our own engineering and medicine.
Which is why studying these outliers is so critical to accelerating our own endeavors, whether it's developing new materials or improving organ preservation.
Exactly. So if the mantis shrimp can overcome that fundamental material trade-off with its bilayer architecture, and the Arctic ground squirrel can bypass the physical constraint of water's freezing point, what seemingly unbreakable rule in human biology or engineering might studying these extremes help us solve next? I mean, think about the material design lessons applied to self-repairing human tissues, or the complete reversal of damage we see in planarians. That's something for you to mull over.